Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven. I'm your host, Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make New Haven tick. Mayor Toni Hart makes New Haven tick, and she's here in the WNHH studio for her weekly Mayor Monday checkup on what she and we are up to in the Elm City. Brenda McDuffie has already joined. Hi, Brendan. Thanks for joining us. Welcome, Mayor Hart.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Nice to see you on this hot summer day. It is summer now. It's official, and we feel it.
Oh, really? Yeah, it feels good to me.
Yeah,
honestly.
it feels good. All right. And
Finally.
Mayor Hart brought along her city engineer, a familiar voice in WNHH. Giovanni's in. How you doing, Giovanni?
Indeed. I'm doing well, Paul. Very nice to be back on here.
It's a little harried before we went on, but I think you said you were under the weather a little bit recently.
I was, yeah, for a while there. And we also had the birth of our child, a little
Whoa.
girl. Yeah.
Mazel tov. When was
Thank
this?
you. This was 3 weeks ago.
How many kids now?
4.
Whoa.
Yep. Well, we have a
Busy guy.
girl now, so we're
Oh, 3
excited.
boys and a girl?
Yep, you got that right.
Are they going to pamper her, you think?
They're trying, that's for sure. I'm not sure how she's taking it, but they're certainly trying.
When's the last time you slept?
Not last night.
Okay, well, we'll help you through this. Thanks for coming in,
Thank you.
Giovanni. We want to thank Gateway Community College and Bertram Moses PC for providing financial support for today's program. And if you have a question, feel free to send it to us through Facebook Live. So, Mayor Harb, you've been running all around. I guess if you had a Fitbit, you probably have a surplus you can give to some other folks. You run to so many events around town.
Well, I've been getting out there.
I wondered if Fitbits can work like solar energy, because we put panels up, and if you have excess, it goes back onto the grid.
Oh, wow.
So if you're
cool.
going to 20 events a day and your Fitbit's 3 times what you need it to be, can you send some of that to other people who are more desk-bound?
Oh, that would be kind of nice, wouldn't it? Because there'd be days that I'd actually need some, too.
That's right. And, of course, we should have some net metering, but that's another subject and another gripe of mine. Okay, so this weekend you were at Arts and Ideas, the final weekend, right?
Yeah.
I heard
yep.
great things this year about Arts and Ideas. I heard that they really hit a stride this summer in terms
I think everybody had so much fun. The last 2 events that I attended, last Saturday and this, I guess it was Sunday. No, it was Saturday. People were dancing on the green in both Saturdays. I mean, thousands of people dancing.
And he had a group from Cuba, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
And then the Force MDs the week before.
Right.
And
yep.
Tabiza the first week.
Yep. So I think it was really very nice. And what was really interesting this past Saturday was that the New Haven Symphony Orchestra played with steel drums from around the city. But
from St. Luke's.
Yeah, most of them from St. Luke's. And the person who directed the steel drum operation at St. Luke's, we'll just call it that whole band, is actually working at the School of Music and wrote a symphony that included a regular orchestra and steel band. And so it was just very interesting to see how she thought about integrating the 2 different types of music. And it was really it was interesting as well as just beautiful to hear.
It was nice weather, so it was really nice sitting out and listening to that.
It was, and we have a new music director. I think his name is Alistair Neal, and has a real interest and experience in working with youth orchestras. And the thing about New Haven that is so great, I think it's the class of '57 from the music school at Yale, donates musical instruments and supports for musical programming to our schools. And so we have quite a musical little school system in New Haven.
Right.
And he's really willing to and wants to take it to the next level.
And I saw you Sunday morning, you were at the Towers, 1 Tower East for the Jewish Historical Society event. And you stayed a long time.
Yeah, it's always so interesting. And there's so many people in the Jewish community that have done so much to preserve the history here in New Haven. And so I always find it very interesting.
Your city historian, Judith Schiff,
Yes.
helped start this in the 70s during the Howard Zinn's People's History Movement.
Oh, my
Nobody knows
goodness.
that aspect. That's this whole lefty history. It's not like a lefty group, Jewish Historical Society. It's kind of the old Oak Street crowd.
Mm-hmm.
But this was Howard Zinn. She went to a conference about people's history. She came back, and we've put out 10 books
Right.
of people's histories in New Haven, and they're great. And now, so that was fun. That was
And also, you're doing the videos as well. And
well, that's the Fortunoff Archive, so that's something separate. New Haven
is,
put up
okay.
the first in the country Holocaust Memorial in a city park, which we
Mhm.
have at West Park Avenue.
Right.
And then around that time, they started an archive at Yale, the Fortunoff Archive. One of the great ones is done by David Hartman's mother, of people survived the Holocaust. They have hundreds and hundreds of videos of people talking about surviving the Holocaust, which now that most people are dying off and people trying to deny the Holocaust, it's a pretty valuable archive. It's used by people all over the world.
Mm.
And they just put out a book that they were unveiling yesterday with some of those stories.
Yeah, I sort of thought it was them because they were announcing the book, but it was
It's the same people get involved. Yeah, David
It-
Fisher, who does the books, also does the other books.
yeah. So it's fascinating what's available in New Haven that isn't available anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
very connected to Jewish past in New Haven. I love the old pictures too. They the old every year they do different pictures at Lafayette Street in 1925, and just how dense the city was, and how many
Mhm.
things there were to do on every block. It was kind of an interesting place. And then today you're going to be all over the place. You already had a press conference this morning with officials from New Haven and Hamden about feeding people in the summer,
Right.
kids.
Mhm.
And these are the kids who get school lunches, right? And the teachers worry they're not going to have food in the summer. So we
Right.
have hundreds of volunteers going out. And how exactly are people getting fed this summer?
Well, most of the money comes from the federal government. So, of course, Rosa DeLauro was there. And so now we have 75 sites that are providing breakfast and lunch. And some of those sites are providing supper as well. And there are about 10 sites in Hamden. And the interesting thing is that
Of the 75 or on top of the 70?
on top.
And are most of them schools?
Most of them are schools or camps. Some of them are community, I like Farnham, Leap,
Mhm. Community
those
centers, yeah.
community centers, boys and girls clubs, but also schools or parks, camps, and sometimes they're churches. They have Vacation Bible School. Believe it or not,
No, I know that all over. Yeah, it's very
all
cool.
over, and so, and all of the various religions that have summer things for kids to do. I believe many of them in New Haven will have the summer meals program.
And according to studies, the poor neighborhoods in New Haven, food insecurity, meaning at least once a month a parent decides between a rent bill and a food, putting meal on the table and kids miss meals, up to 50% in some of those neighborhoods. So this is a big, big deal. And you had 2 events in 3 days, which says to me the big concern is getting the word out so people know to go.
They know that there's a place for the kids to go to eat. And the other thing that you don't think about, it's free, first of all, and you don't have to produce any kind of ID or any of that. Anybody can come as long as you're 18 or younger.
All right. And then I wanted to ask you that you were in the process of picking a new police chief. Last week you had the final interviews with the 3 finalists. Oh, we have a question from Emily Perez Silva. I'm going to save it a couple of minutes, Emily. Thanks for the question. Until we move over to the Giovanni Zinn portion of this, because this is his bailiwick. But I
All
wanted to ask,
right.
and this is going to be good stuff. So, but I wanted to ask Mayor Harp first about the police chief search. You narrowed down 3 people. You decided to go in New Haven, people who've had some experience in New Haven Police Department.
I have, and I still haven't made a decision. So I'm looking at a number of things, trying to get as much information as I can, and so that I can make an informed decision. I may actually look at people who didn't make the 3. So
Oh, so what's that? You mean you're going to expand it back?
I might, yeah,
And why is that?
because I'm just looking at everything.
Do you have a timeline when you think you might pick?
I'm hoping to do it soon, but I don't want to make a hasty decision and make
Mhm.
a bad one.
All right. And then on the police union contract, I'm told you've moved it out of arbitration and you've been looking at some kind of possible deal with how to pay cops more.
I haven't spoken to Tom McCarthy, who does the negotiation for that, but I'm hearing that they're close.
All right. That's a good deal.
Yeah.
So close to having some kind of deal rather than arbitration.
Right. But I didn't hear it from Tom, but I did hear it from folks that they think that they're close and that they are. And it's my sense that if they're close, it will not be part of an arbitration agreement.
And then speaking of the police, you heard about Detective a detective last week. Detective Detective. We're not allowed to say their names.
Oh, you're not?
These 2 detectives who are partners had an amazing week last week.
Oh, okay.
But we weren't allowed to write a cop of the week about them because they're worried about having their face and name on the street because of the kind of cases they do,
Okay.
and their families are concerned
Okay.
that there'll be retribution. But boy, did they have a week.
Yeah.
So these 2 detectives, we just call them, They one's on the shootings task force, which looks at where people get shot to stop the next one and be proactive, and the intelligence unit, which gets the sources to tell you where to go. So these guys, it wasn't just last week. They have a tendency to be at the right place at the right time when something's happening and finding people because people trust them and give them information.
Mm-hmm.
So on Tuesday, they didn't just happen to be on Huntington Street in New Hallville. They were there when somebody shot somebody.
Right.
Or they saw it.
Mm-hmm.
They raided in the car. Without incident, they arrested the person so nobody else was going to get shot in retaliation.
That's fantastic.
The next day, they they were looking at 2 unrelated murders, not related to these shootings. You know, when someone gets shot in New Haven, it happens a lot fewer shootings than there used to be, but they happen, and what happens is they spiral. People retaliate. They kind of have to get on top of it, or else it goes out of control. So they wanted to make sure someone who had a connection to some of these murders was not going to be the next person shot or the next person shooting. And one thing we do in New Haven that we didn't used to do is every week our intelligence officers work with state and federal people doing the same work.
Every day.
They used to compete.
Every day except Thursday.
Except Thursday. And this was Wednesday.
Okay.
So they found out this guy was in danger or might be involved. And they had the Fed said, ATF said they had an outstanding warrant for him.
Oh, wow.
And the police had arrested him 2 weeks ago, but he was out. He had fought the police. He had guns. He had tried to beat him up, but he was out.
Mm-hmm.
But ATF said, hey, we have another thing that you could serve. So these 2, Detective and found out where he was. He wasn't at home. Someone let them know where to go. So he went to West Hazel Street, 1 block street between Sherman and Dixwell. And there he is on a porch. He sees them. He runs inside. They get worried that, the guy finally has guns. So they clear people out. And the people couldn't, they set up 2 sets of yellow tape. They brought the SWAT team. Looked like a movie. And they were worried, but they got the trust of I was watching them trusting the people right along the perimeter, got them to talk the guy out without any incident in the end. So what a week for those 2 detectives, whatever their names are.
We have extraordinary officers working for the New Haven Police Department. We're very proud of them. And I will tell you that people come from all around the world to look at what we're doing in New Haven. So,
especially that coordination, which is really interesting to share of intelligence. It's so interesting how intelligence and thinking and talking to people can do so much more than shooting people, arresting them.
You noticed that, huh?
But it's a revolutionary concept.
But,
it actually is being done differently from the way it's done most of the time you and I have been in the city.
Yeah. Well, it is, but, it makes sense once you sort of process it. We probably should have been doing that all along. And
we're processing that on Mayor Monday at WNHH-FM, your home for community radio at 103.5, live stream at newhavenbend.org. We got Mayor Harp in the house, and we have Giovanni Zinn, one of the rock stars of city government, city engineer, and now father of 4.
Indeed.
And Emily Perez Silva writes in. This is not a question, it's an imperative statement.
Okay.
Ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Fix the sidewalk on Palmieri Avenue, District 12. The trees have uprooted the sidewalk. Are you ready?
On it.
You have your marching orders? So are you really on it?
Yeah.
Tell me about it, Giovanni.
Well, I actually could pull up Google Street View right now and take a look at it if I wasn't on the radio, but I'll have staff take a look at it and we'll get it right out there and hopefully we'll get to it this season.
Now, this is the season we're fixing sidewalks.
Right, yes.
And when you think about government, Mayor Harp and Giovanni Zinn, I'm guessing that you hear a lot more about sidewalks than about most things.
Absolutely.
Sidewalks is one of our top requests. That's definitely the case. I think one of the things that we've done in the last few years is try to be a lot more responsive to some of these smaller issues, like the tree uproots and things like that. Years ago we
have old trees.
We do.
And
we have a lot of
push up
very
the
important trees. I mean, they do a lot of wonderful things for our air and for energy consumption, all of that. Unfortunately, especially if the tree species isn't selected properly, they do tend to lift up the sidewalks. So it's something that we continuously work with the Parks Department and try to respond to those requests. So years ago we had sort of one big sidewalk contract where we kind of tried to focus on larger stretches of sidewalk, which looks very nice, is very expensive.
And by contract, you mean we hire someone?
Correct.
Outside.
Yeah. So we don't do any of the sidewalk work ourselves. It's somewhat specialized work. It's a certain set of skills, and there's so much of it that basically we have people working consistently on it. We're now up to 5 different contractors, including 3 of our small business contractors that focus on what we call these small isolated repairs. So
and as part of this, our effort to diversify whom we hire are some of these minority contractors.
Yes, yeah. So we
That's been
have
a big
4
advance in
New
the
Haven-based contractors right now, 3 of whom are minority.
Okay, because it's always been white companies in the past, I think, that did sidewalks.
Right, yes. So
That's who was in the business and who taught it to each other.
right.
And
I mean, I think that it's we want to make sure that everyone in New Haven has an opportunity to bid on these jobs, no matter how big your company is, whether it's the minority company or not. So now we have these small sidewalk contracts up to $150,000. It's a lot easier to get the bonding for it. There are fewer requirements on it. It's not a prevailing wage, for example, and there's some of the paperwork associated with that, and that allows a lot of these smaller contractors to be able to get work.
Does it enable us to do more contracts?
Oh,
more
absolutely,
sidewalks,
yeah.
Doing less and Emily Perez Silva thanks you, Giovanni.
Well, we'll
Thanks,
be out
my
there. Please be in touch with us. We're happy to give you updates as we take a look at it.
She writes, thanks, my parents are retired and have requested this a few years ago. The only thing that happened was some sidewalk grinding. And Sam, thanks for your question about the schools. We're going to get to schools later in this hour. Giovanni said, we can't fix every sidewalk every year, correct?
Correct, yes.
If you had to guess, how many sidewalks need to be fixed in New Haven?
It's hard to quantify that. We have 373 miles of sidewalk in New Haven. As 3 years ago, we were at a pace of replacing them once every 86 years. Concrete does last a while; doesn't quite last that long. We've since upped our investment in sidewalks. I think over the next 2 years, we're doing $6.4 million worth of sidewalks
Per year?
No, in total. Yeah, because it's a 2-year budget.
Okay.
And then we also have some state money as well.
So
And,
how much total do we have?
I believe
money.
it's I think it's approximately $7 million over the next couple of years.
Over 2 years.
Yeah.
And how many sidewalks can that fix?
Sidewalks are generally speaking about $90 a square yard. So
It's great how you have these numbers.
every
He's good.
Oh, I can go
That's
through
why we
it.
love having him on radio.
Right.
We wonk out every time
Yeah.
Giovanni's on the mic.
Yeah, I mean, our current contracts, one of our large contracts is $63.90 a square yard, and ranges up to some of our isolateds, which mean you have to keep moving and doing, and you don't get these big long stretches. Those are about, I think right now our current one is $89 a square yard.
But ballpark, how many sidewalks is
Yeah,
that going to be?
so you figure it's probably ends up being sidewalk is 5 feet wide. A foot of sidewalk is $120 or something like that. So that's a lot of math to do in my head.
I'm just thinking, you say there are 373 miles of sidewalk. You take 86 years to replace them. Over the next 2
Right.
years, how many miles will we replace?
I got to pull out my calculator for
Okay,
that.
in the meantime, so one thing we've done differently, and the mayor and I have talked about this often on the air, is that New Haven has a system now where we pick out whose sidewalk get fixed. Because it's funny, people state it as fact. You have to have an inn to get your sidewalk fixed. They always do it in the rich neighborhood, not the poor neighborhoods. And as we followed for the last few years, there's actually a committee with alders from all over the city who decide which parts in each of their wards need the most repair, and that we spread it out. So my sense is that your sense too, Mayor Harp, that in fact it is based on need and it's done democratically. And since we can't fix every sidewalk, we've come up with a system that's different from what we used to see.
Yeah, I think it's called the Resource Allocation
Yeah,
Committee.
I'm never going to remember that name because I think it's just so.
Me either, really. And
such a bureaucratic name.
evidently it flows through. But at any rate,
Yeah, you got it. You got it.
What they do is there's a numerical system that I'm sure Giovanni can explain to a greater degree than I can, and all of our sidewalks are rated as to what they need, as are all of our roads. And the committee makes a decision with most of the resources that we have based upon those that have the highest rating, as I understand it, means that they have the worst problems. So based upon the sidewalks that have the worst problems. Now, that doesn't mean that from time to time, if an alder comes in and says, I've really got to have this, that they won't consider it.
Some of them are dangerous. I mean, the tree, there's some, but also I would imagine that's not evenly distributed, the problem. I mean,
Correct,
every problem
yeah.
has broken
Right.
sidewalks, but as the mayor says, you might not have the highest ranking, but you have little kids on a stroller or old people walking down the
Sure.
street, and sidewalks 4 inches up.
Yeah, I mean, if I
replace it.
can flesh out a little bit more of that, we do a sidewalk condition inventory. We have someone, basically a consultant, drive the city as per ordinance every 5 years. Last one was in 2016. We're gearing up to do one in 2021. And that gives us, they actually rate sidewalks qualitatively, everything from excellent to poor, and there are 4 sort of categories there. And then we look at factors much like, the mayor said and you said, you look at where are people walking. So if this is right near a school, or it's a popular way for a neighborhood to get to their commercial strip or something like that obviously
So you also
bumps
look at
up
need.
the importance.
So
of it.
did you do any math there, Giovanni, for like how many miles you think we'll do over the next 2 years?
I think it's probably about 8 to 10 miles. Yeah.
Okay, out of 373.
Yep.
And so, do you think would ever be possible? Like Mayor Rice, Frank Rice, 100 years ago, was known as the sidewalk mayor. And he was before the era of Dick Lee and people who saw the mayor's job as a very ambitious job to give vision for a city, move it into a new era, change the way cities work. His idea was, and this is memorialized in Doug Ray's book, City Urbanism and Its End, that the job of a city is to fix the sidewalks. And he wanted to be the sidewalk mayor.
Well,
And he
what's
got
funny
already-
about that, Paul, is that by city ordinance, it's actually the property owner's responsibility. However, the Board of Alders also, by city charter, can appropriate money to fix sidewalks. And I think that they're very important. We always focus a lot on getting cars through our neighborhoods and around, and we forget how important it is to have people be able to get out and walk to the bus stop, or walk around the neighborhood for exercise, or walk out and meet their neighbors. I mean, that's how I've met a lot of my neighbors, is walking around the neighborhood.
So if we wanted to replace all our sidewalks every 4 years, we would need like $70 million a year for sidewalks.
Something like that, yeah.
We'd have to
it's
tax
not-
everybody so they'd leave town.
Yeah, I mean, you hope that we're pouring
Yeah.
sidewalks
and
that
then you
last
wouldn't have
longer.
a problem, right? Because nobody be walking on them.
Now, Giovanni, you were at the Board of Alders last week at a committee meeting talking about bridges. What's up with bridges?
Actually,
in
it's
New
coming
Haven?
up on Thursday.
Okay.
Yes, so we're doing our bridge report. We've actually revamped our entire bridge report. We've identified more bridges than we thought we had. We actually, I want to give a shout out to Zachary Shapiro, New Haven native, who is our chief structural engineer. He actually went through and followed all the water courses through town and everything, and found more. So we actually.
Does that mean we don't notice it because we're driving on a road and
Correct,
it's actually
yeah.
a bridge underneath?
So, for example, one of the bridges we recently replaced was a couple summers ago, right at the entrance to Gateway College's garage. You would never know that's a bridge.
That's right. I remember you were on radio
And,
talking about
that. Was
And
that
there
was a big
one
deal.
by Middletown Avenue too, right? Isn't there one by a state highway? It's on one of the state roads that they were just replacing near the railroad tracks.
Oh yes, so the Ferry Street Bridge over the railroad track
No,
is
I
going
meant
to
there was
get
another one.
replaced.
Okay, never mind.
Okay,
Where is it?
there's a lot of bridges.
So you
near
discovered we have
Middletown
more
Avenue.
bridges than we have. Now,
Right,
what's
and a
the
lot of them are
takeaway here?
smaller ones. So the way that we manage bridges is the state actually inspects every 2 years all the bridges that are over 20 feet in length. And they give us a bridge condition report, and they rate all of our bridges on a safety scale from 0, which is the bridge has completely failed, to 10, which is impossible to get, but it means your bridge is in perfect condition. Even a brand new bridge usually rates a 9. So we have a lot of bridges here. We have 60 bridges that are owned and maintained by the city, and then we have a role in maintaining parts of another about 20 bridges. Of the 60 bridges that we own and maintain, I'm happy to report that only 2 of them rate a 4 or below. They're actually, I think, both 4s, and that's the Grand Avenue Bridge over the Quinnipiac River, which we've heard a lot about. And then the second one is the Humphrey Street Bridge over the Mill River, which we are, I think, almost at semifinal design for. So
That bridge is kind of tiny, right?
it's pretty small. Yeah,
I can't even picture it as a bridge.
It's the bridge.
sure.
It's actually, that
The
sort of railroad
Yeah.
underpass that you go. It's actually right before that. You'll notice it every time you drive over it now. My wife hates driving with me around the city because I'm always looking at the infrastructure around me.
But it must be fun for the kids because if they're yelling and giving each other noogies and stuff, you can say, "Look at that bridge." You
Oh
didn't know
yeah.
that's a
Oh
bridge.
no, they're big fans of it.
It must be fun being Giovanni Zinn's kid because taking a car ride, I learned so much. I'm totally serious.
Well,
You
I'll
got
have to
3
go home and
boys.
ask them.
But when you finally get a nap in 20 years, you'll look back and they're going to tell you we had a lot of fun for 20
Yeah,
years.
there you go.
So, Mayor Harp, what do you hear most about infrastructure when you're running around? You're going for re-election now. Do you hear more about sidewalks, bridges, bike lanes? I know you hear about all of it, but what are people most concerned about?
Very seldom hear about bike lanes.
Really?
I hear about potholes.
Yeah.
I hear about speed humps. and I sometimes hear about sidewalks.
Now, do you still hear that people want speed humps? Because when we first started putting
Oh,
them in,
everybody wants speed humps.
because at first people are complaining because drivers are worried that they can't go as fast; it's going to hurt their car. You know what I mean? That's not good for your car.
Yeah, no, everybody wants them. I don't go to a neighborhood that hasn't found a street that needs a speed hump.
And Giovanni, you can't put a speed hump everywhere, right? Because it costs a lot
Right,
of
you
money,
can't
and you
put it-
necessarily want it, right?
Right. So there are certainly occasions where a speed hump isn't appropriate. Certainly, once you get into higher volume streets, you
And
start
what's
to
the reason? Make it go too slow?
You start to get rear end collisions. You know, too much traffic, that sort of thing. We also try to make sure that there is a speed concern on a street. You know, we do, however, really defer to the residents. They're the ones that live there. They're the experts of our neighborhoods. We're the experts of the technical
But
solutions.
I've seen this too, and I think you and Doug Housling Transit are just great at this. I've seen you be so patient, like when you're building this bike lane on the side, you know, on the west side, when you were coming up with a solution to everyone having different opinions. You would very patiently talk about how sometimes there are rules about how wide something can be or how many cars are actually going down. And you just mentioned with speed humps, sometimes they don't make sense because you could have rear end collisions given the volume. So as Mayor Hart pointed out, people kind of look at a solution. They're understandably, and they're the experts of how traffic is on their block. But then they kind of fixate on a solution, right? Now it seems to be speed humps. I didn't realize that, but that's not always the best solution. Are you able to go some places and say, hey, it makes sense to have a roundabout? I know you
sure,
did,
yeah.
Chapel Street did a great roundabout, and
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that Doug and I have found very helpful is actually going out and having meetings in the community on the street itself. So the first few times we did this, we would go to like a local school or something like that, and everyone would sort of be talking from memory. And we found that it's super helpful to actually go and walk the street with the neighborhood. You get a lot more participation because people can duck out of their houses. We get to see the street, you know, and live it and experience it and watch people driving by. Having a huge number, you know, 30 people walking down a street in a big group usually slows traffic down, but you'd be surprised. Some people still rip by at 40 miles an hour. And it's also an opportunity for us to, you know, have a conversation about what the problem is. You know, usually conversations start with the solution. But I think people very quickly realize, you know what, let's talk about the problem. Let's really examine what this is. You know, sometimes it's everyone's going 10 miles an hour over the speed limit. Other times is, well, everyone's usually pretty good, but we really have a racing problem where you have that last, you know, 10% of people that just speed like crazy and everything. Otherwise, it's, you know, pretty reasonable. And those are different ways of dealing with traffic calming. You know, we talk about the 3 E's of traffic calming.
3 E's?
3 E's, yes. Although Doug has expanded to a couple more. I can't remember what they are. But the 3 E's that I remember are engagement, engineering, and enforcement. You know, you think about it as a three-legged stool. You can't solve every speeder with engineering. That would make the road more or less impassable to anybody who, you know, is reasonable. You know, so enforcement and engagement, you know, teaching people what is the correct thing. There's a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit pretty much everywhere in New Haven. And, you know, I try very hard to drive that, driving 25 miles an hour today.
I get a lot of flack from my family because I always go with the 25,
Yeah.
and people honk, and they, you know.
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting that, you know, modern cars are very capable, and going 25 miles an hour in a modern vehicle is, you know, is really actually kind of hard to stay there, but it's important.
Munson and Crescent. So you have,
Correct. Yes.
what do you have going in there?
So we have a roundabout going in
love
starting
those.
next month. Yes. So it's a nice and big one. There's it's a very weird intersection, and we have a lot of real estate there, so we're able to put a pretty large one in. I think it'll make a real sort of signature gateway to the neighborhood there, and it'll slow people down. You know, a lot of people, you know, talk about stop signs and traffic lights and things like that. Those aren't traffic calming measures. Those are, you know, sort of regulatory safety measures more than,
Gotcha.
you know.
And I know that in the safe street system, I've heard a lot from Huntington, and for some reason, you hear from all over the city, but I've heard Huntington and Winchester for years. There were a lot of cases where people speed down the hill. A kid got hit once, someone else on a bike. Do you know if anything's ever going to happen there?
Yeah, actually, I think just last week the Alder reached out, and we're gonna, you know, go through the process and try to find a solution there. Hills are challenging because that takes a few things out of our quiver.
Yeah. And that's the issue there because it ends at the bottom of
so
it.
hills are tough, but you know, I'm looking forward to meeting with you know, walking the street with the community there and finding a solution.
Not too tough for New Haven.
No,
We take every challenge.
We take it seriously,
And we talk about it on Mayor Monday here on WNHH 103.5 FM, live streamed at newhavenevent.org. Mayor Tony Harp is in the house along with Giovanni Zinn, our city engineer. And folks, thanks for your other questions. We're going to get back to some of those. I just want to ask Giovanni one more. The mayor said she's not hearing about bike lanes. We used to just hear about bike lanes all the time. You have a protected bike lane. It took years to get on the west side of town, going from Forest to Park on Edgewood. You had to go to Hartford and get state law changed. People don't know that
Correct.
the Hartford administration actually did that. You went to Hartford, you got a state law change, so we got a protected two-way bike lane. People actually complain about the bike lane. You had to negotiate with people about how to make sure there's still parking at a coffee shop and things like that.
Yep.
So where are we now with that?
So we're actually out to bid. We had to, there's a lot. 2 years ago, we were sort of at the conceptual design stage. We had a lot of work to do there to make sure everyone's concerns were addressed. I think we found a solution that worked for everyone, and then the hard work began. The project actually is less at the end of the day about bike lanes and more about traffic signal improvements and walkability improvements. That's where the money ends up going. We're adding walk signals to the whole downtown third of the traffic signals there. So we have 12 traffic signals that we affected, and all of those each individually go through an approval process up at the state. I think each one of them had about 4 or 5 rounds of comments that went back and forth from the design team to the state. So it's all very, very time consuming. But we finally, at the end of May, got our approval to our project authorization letter from the state and our approval to go out to bid. And I think by the end of the month, we're opening bids.
And when do you think it'll be built by?
Again, depends on what we get back in terms of bids. We get good bids back. We should be in construction this year.
And do you think it'll be done by the end of the year?
I think certainly portions of it. I'm always reticent to guarantee a particular time frame on something like this. It probably should be around that time. If some of it leaks into the spring, that'll do it. Some of the traffic signal components in particular can have extended lead times. So I think you'll see portions of it at least up and running completely, and then there might be some things that we have lead time issues on.
It's gonna be really interesting to see it.
I think so as well. Yeah, I mean it's a corridor that we had a lot of concerns about traffic calming and other things. Everyone talks about the bikes because that's the sort of the most obvious feature. But I think it'll actually do a lot for traffic calming
Troop
and
School.
pedestrians. Yeah,
Yep, Troop School. People are always worried about crossing there.
I think there are 5 schools in that corridor actually.
Yeah, and Mayor Harv, a question: does the city plan to appeal the state judge's recent order decision in the lead poisoning class action lawsuits? That was saying that the city should abide by the standard it was using until last November of 5. Let me get this right. There's a 5 blood level. Megaliter. Oh, damn. But the state uses a 20 level. We always used 5 because the Centers for Disease Control updated what they said is a dangerous level. Then we started going to 20. The judge is saying go back to 5. Are you going to appeal that or what?
We haven't really decided yet, so we're looking at all of the information. I will say that we probably will let everyone know by either the end of the week or the beginning of next.
Okay, and there's a candidate forum for mayoral candidates been invited by Dennis Serfilippi, who's a local gadfly guy, on the budget, and asking if you're going to attend to that.
No, I will not be attending.
Okay, and then another question is, what is the response from the mayor on the decision by superintendent to transfer 53 public school teachers and concerns that it wasn't transparent? Now that's off the table now, right?
It was, and I voted. So if people notice that we voted to take that off the table, and I voted with the rest of the Board of Education.
And the mayor, the Superintendent Burks has some major announcement coming tonight. You familiar with what
Does
it
she?
is? Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
All right. Well, we may know what it is.
Discussed it with me.
Maybe we'll do Superintendent Tuesday after Mayor Monday, which you're listening to at 103.5. And one of the places you went to last week was an opening for Island Spice. Nadine Tracy, 8 years ago, opened a Caribbean restaurant on Whaley, right off Whaley on Winthrop. One of those ones you have to look to your left and not hit any cars and still go under 25 to see the restaurant, but it's got a popular following in the neighborhood. And the city has a program through Livable City Initiative where you match the cost up to $20,000 to expand businesses, fix the outside, expand business, and that money goes a long way. So last week you went to an opening, and now in the past you had to only do takeout at Island Spice, and now you could sit there. They're going to be tables the way they did around the corner at the seafood place. Any thoughts on that? Did you try the oxtail, which is apparently their?
It's really good. My understanding is they didn't have any that day, and I had actually had lunch right before I got there. I didn't realize there was going to be food like that, but everybody that was there was really enjoying it. the rehab job that they did was beautiful, and it's a lovely place. And I'm really excited that it's in the community and people can go and enjoy Caribbean food in a beautiful place.
Another place you were last week was Promise in New Haven. They reported that we now have something called persistence, which is how long people stay in college. We get them a college scholarship through the Promise New Haven program. New Haven Public School students, some of them get paid the full freight if they go to state colleges. They found that 65% of the Promise scholarship students are making it through a 4-year college.
Right.
And now the goal has been set at 75%. Any thoughts on how you're going to reach that?
Well, I think that one of the things that is great about Promise is that they constantly connect with young people that are in the Promise program. And they provide or help to facilitate getting jobs for young people in the summertime. And for those who are closer in the city, even jobs during the school year. And I think that helps. A lot of times young people drop out of school because they have to raise money for their families. And so the fact that they can work in the summertime and some of them work during the school year makes a huge difference because many of them have to help their families. And so I think that we'll make the 75%. Already the 65% is well above the national average.
I got to believe that Patricia Melton is part of the reason for that. She runs New Haven Promise. She's been there a while now. And sometimes you just find the right person for a job, becomes such a part of the community. So she was a scholarship student who made it through Yale and had a very successful career, came back to New Haven to run it. And what I noticed in talking to her and watching what she does with her group is she seems to really understand what a student needs to do once he or she is in college to stay there. So she brings people in to work with her. She keeps in touch with those kids. And I think personally gives some really good advice and finds out what it's going to take to keep you there and what you need to tackle to stay in college. So I always thought that was one of the good hires in the community.
And one thing that I didn't mention is that a lot of the New Haven students, they have come up through very difficult situations. They're the first to go to college in their families, but they have a resilience oftentimes that other folks may not have because they've had to work hard to get to where they are, and they have a different sense of what I would consider to be true grit and resilience that you often don't see in the majority population.
And if New Haven's not a city of grit, what is it? Aaron Good, who always thinks of stuff I hadn't thought about, has a really good question. Thank you for writing it as usual, Aaron. Does Giovanni know? Writes Aaron. Ready,
Giovanni knows everything.
That's true, he does.
No.
Does Giovanni know when construction will be completed on improvements to the Newhallville Learning Corridor that were supposed to be done last year until an underground storage tank was discovered? Just so people know, Newhallville Learning Corridor is a great name for a place because it used to be called the Mud Hole. And if you read the New Yorker magazine in the 80s, that was OK Corral. That's where crack gangs were shooting each other to death. And it was out in the open. Newhallville Learning Corridor has been claimed. That whole area around Shelton and West Hazel, Hazel and that area, the whole community comes there and does these walks with the community. They do food and clothing giveaways. They do a Saturday event out in public, all right out there in the public area with people of all ages. And I just think it's a great place. So what? Now that I've given the lead up. So
there you go. Well, thank you. I know it's a fantastic project and one that I'm very excited about. Doreen Abubakar's been doing a fantastic job, organizing so many people and, too many to list around that. We have removed the rather large, it's probably a 4,000 or 5,000 gallon gasoline tank that was there from the site's history as a gas station back in the day. And we have to reconnect the water line and then get some electricity hooked up. We're finalizing one detail as to whether the water line needs a backflow preventer. We're getting the runaround from the various different authorities having jurisdiction right now, but we're trying to solve that
so
this
week. So it's a
week.
city how every inch of property is owned by a different, comes under the auspices of another entity. A lot of owners in a dense city, and then utilities have different rights.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and it's, I work on it every day, and it's very confusing even to us, and so I can only imagine how it is to your, average property
What
owner
happens in
the
the end? What kind of improvements happen?
So we have Water, we'll have actually, I think next week we're starting to install some exercise equipment, and
And
actually
at which part? Like right where the
right at the triangle.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we've installed lighting on 2 blocks of the corridor. We have to finish the electrical service. I think we're probably going to wrap up in the next next month or so.
And Lucy says thank you for shouting out Doreen. Yeah, Doreen is one of the great.
Oh yeah, no, she's
She's
fantastic
been on here.
and does a lot of good work there.
All right.
And it's really it's a vision. We love it when our projects come from the community and
Well,
we
that's
can
what I was
help
going
out
to
with
say.
that.
Like sort of government in the last generation, the view of government I think has evolved from not always being the initiator of grand projects, but being an enabler and supporter of ideas that come up from the grassroots where energy is already starting, right? So a lot of people, immigrants open restaurants. We do a lot with infrastructure around there to help that be a successful district. Or in the learning corridor, a neighborhood reclaims its main triangle there, and then you're there with the backup to help it go strong.
Yeah, a lot of our best projects come from that.
Another really good one in that neighborhood is Cherry Ann Street Park that was done by Mrs. Vereen over there. She was the initiator. It was a park that was just never taken care of. And so the neighborhood got together with the city and with URI, and we got a Scott's grant and other grants. And it's a beautiful place now.
Well, Cherry Ann Park, we love to tell that story over and over because when you and I grew up, that's the kind of peace, love, flower view of the world we love. I mean, you have a neighborhood that's divided by Hamden and New Haven,
Right.
and they all get together. You have a trashed area at the end of the cul-de-sac that's just overgrown. You have all these kids just playing out in the street, and the neighborhood gets together, spends Saturdays cleaning it out. The city parks department comes and brings all this help. They get all this money, as you mentioned, a grant, and they make it into a great park for the community. I mean, what could be better than that? Bud Mentz says, hello, Mayor Harp.
Hi, Bud.
And Daniel Hunt asked about the next police chief. Mayor Harp said she's not making a decision yet. She wants to be careful to do it right, and that she's going to look beyond the 3 who were the finalists. Or is it still going to be someone who worked for the New Haven department, or are you also looking at the Baltimore and Chicago applicants? Are they still in the mix?
Well, I'm hoping that it'll at least be someone who understands the way that we police here, and it may be one of the 3. I just want to take my time and make sure that I have all my ducks in a row.
All right. So you'd rather get it right than you have some set a deadline on it.
Yes.
All right. The what else? Oh, fiber optic. And this is a good Giovanni. So I've been blown away by this book that just came out by a woman named Susan Crawford. She's a law professor at Harvard. Yale Press just put out the book. And she believes the single biggest issue for any city in the world, but especially America, is getting last mile to the house fiber optic connections for the internet. Her argument is that these fibers, they're under the ocean now, and basically the whole internet can go on like 3 of them. These little thin fibers they do at Corningware. But that in places like Singapore, Seoul, was it Helsinki? I forget. What
Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Chattanooga, Tennessee. They've built these networks where 100% of the people have internet in these other countries that are 3 times as fast as anywhere in America, but they pay half as much as we do because she lays out, this law professor, a conspiracy by the telecoms and the cable companies to pass laws at state levels to stop communities from having last mile fiber networks. So we're talking also about 5G wireless we're going to have, but she says it means nothing on that last mile if you can't get it through the pipes at the last mile, and they want to control it. So you mentioned Chattanooga, Mayor Harp. There's a place, Wilson, North Carolina, only 50,000 people. They built their own fiber optic network last mile to the house. And they had businesses coming from all over the country to start up there because of the fast network, while every town around them was dirt poor. And then the telecoms got the North Carolina legislature to pass a law that nobody else can do that. Only they can do it. And they're actually getting states. There's a group called ALEC, the right-wing group that gets all states. They're writing these laws in every state where they pass where you can't do it. So Chattanooga did it. They want to make sure other people don't do it. And I was wondering. So
we've been blocked here.
Who blocks us?
We were blocked by PURA.
That's the Public Utility Regulatory Agency.
Right.
What's their rule?
Basically, there was a bill that was passed by Beth Bayh years ago, about 6 years ago, that said that we could use the municipal gain on the light poles, telephone poles for whatever we wanted. The telecoms went to PURA and had them rule that we could not do that, and that was part of the plan that we had to try to.
And Democrats are appointing PURA.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
So you want to do that? So I had another thought when I was listening to this, and this is so above my pay grade. So you guys tell me if this is anywhere in reality. I'm reading this book and I'm thinking, where do we control the land and where can we dig? And I was thinking the housing authority owns a lot of land and they've been rebuilding developments. And they also want there to be business development on that land and jobs for people. Would it be possible for the housing authority to form some kind of, and they have this great nonprofit, Glendower, that does development and management. Could they use their own property and dig under the ground to do a demonstration project for fiber optic cable to the home so that people in public housing could get 3 times as fast internet service for 1/3, which has a lot to do with economic opportunity, and they can lure actually job creation. Does that even make sense?
I mean, I think I'd have to take a look at
You
another
wouldn't
map
need
at
those poles.
the housing authority property. It's certainly when they do a development, they can put in the conduits and everything for that.
I'm
I
thinking
think,
West Rock, of course, because they've
Right.
always wanted to have business development there.
Yes, I think one of the challenges is that you have to somehow get back to a network, and you end up running into the telecoms.
But they
and
then have to do business with you if you create that last mile. They want to collect
Right.
the last mile so that you have to pay them. They control what you can watch and how
Right.
much you can pay.
So we've looked a lot at this. I mean, the bulk of the places that have done their own fiber have been places that also control their own electric distribution, and I think we can't forget how intertwined. The fact that here
But
we
we
have
own our light poles, don't we?
we own our lights, not our light poles, by and large. We
That's
do
so
own some light
interesting.
poles, but
So they are evil. I'm sorry, that's my opinion. Okay.
Well, I think shutting down the municipal gain for anything other than our own city operations is a big deal because the city has a lot of traffic and parking fiber and other assets that we could have leveraged to do that. That being said, I think we're starting to see some people coming into the city. I think in your part of the city, actually, Paul, you can go out and get fiber to the home right now, and it's a lot less expensive. I mean, I pay a certain cable company
Now, how do
over on the East
how
Shore.
do they do it?
I believe there are a bunch of executives from one of the large commercial fiber companies that went out and set up their own company. I'm not going to say, I'm not plugging any commercial entities, so I won't say their name, but and they know how to do it, and they've got relationships with the fiber world.
How do they get permission? So Comcast and Frontier can't block them from
I
going to
think
my house?
they somehow pay to get access onto the poles. Yeah.
Yeah, so because it
and
really
they-
should be underground,
Right.
shouldn't it?
So I believe it's sort of Beaver Hills, Newhall, East Rock, all those areas of town have it right now. And you can get much cheaper internet right now, fiber to the home.
and I think some of Westville has it too, because where I live, I got a little card in the mail. But they are actually trying to compete with the telecoms and to get people high speed.
So the
Fiber.
reason I asked is I noticed on the agenda of one of the management team meetings in East Rock tonight, that company is pitching. And I hadn't ever seen a private company pitching at a management team meeting. So I guess they're really trying to move in on Comcast and all that.
It's hard to get the word out, right?
All right. Well, we got the word out today on Mayor Monday. Thanks so much for joining us. Thanks, everyone, for the questions. Sorry I didn't get to all of them, but we did have a great guest this week. I think we should make this a regular thing. I love when you bring in your department heads.
Well, I think I'm going to try to start bringing some of them in, at least for the next little while.
They're
Should
always
be fun.
welcome. Yes, I think it always adds a lot. You got such great talent there,
Yeah.
including Giovanni Zinn, who's always one of our favorites. So thanks, Giovanni.
Well,
for
we got to
joining
get
us.
back to Infrastructure Thursdays with Doug. We got to get back our show back on the air.
You have it anytime you want.
Yeah, because he didn't get to tell you about berms and all the other stuff, that we get to learn about if you don't know about those things. So
10 seconds on berms.
Well, we're doing living shorelines. We're doing
that's right.
over a mile of living shorelines on the East Shore,
And that means climate
Long
change
Wharf.
is coming, higher tides. We're going to guard
Oh
against
yeah,
that.
there's a lot of that. That's hours of discussion right there.
But what you're doing is you got federal money for coastal
State money.
resilience. For
State
coastal
money,
resilience.
yes. Correct.
And we're protecting our shoreline by building up those berms.
Correct. Yeah, we're creating natural ecosystems that are much more erosion tolerant. Also, they migrate as sea levels rise. So it's an investment that will continue to protect, 50 to 100 years in the future.
Interesting. So the East Shore
East Shore and Long Wharf.
and Union Station area where it always used to flow.
Right, which then goes into the whole discussion about the Long Wharf resiliency plan.
Which we will get back to. But we did get to the berms. Thank you.
All right.
All right. We're berming out here at Mayor Monday. Thanks for joining us. Thanks to Gateway Community College, Bertram Moses PC for providing financial support. Thanks to Harry Drost, the magic behind it, and helped out by Sam Hadelman, our great tech intern for the summer. We're going to take it out with the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. This is Paul Bass inviting you to fly free with us all day and all night long here at WNHH, New Haven's home for community radio.